Rotarians, please find your seat and we'll call this meeting to order. Just a reminder about our national anthem. It's not in all thy sons' command, it's in all of us command. Okay, you've had enough practice. Let's try to get it right. Jake, you're going to lead us in O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all our sons' command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Well done. Nice tenor version. Please find your glass. And join me in a toast to the Queen. Queen. And to Canada. And to Rotary. Yeah. Please bow your heads. I borrowed this, well, it's not really an invocation, it's just a thought, actually. I borrowed it from Herb Silverman, and I've used it before, but several people in the club said they liked it, so I'm going to do it again. So it's more of a thought than an invocation, but I like it, so I'm going to read it again. Each of us is a minority with respect to something. It might be race, religion, sexual orientation, nationality, or any other way we may be regarded as different. Each of us is also part of some majority. It is when we wear our majority hats that we need to be most mindful of how we treat others. We must pledge our best efforts to help one another and to defend the rights of all our citizens and residents. What divides us is not so much our religious beliefs in this diverse country, but the degree of commitment we have to equal freedom of conscience for all people. We are gathered today, both religious and secular members of our community, with the shared belief that we must treat other fellow human beings with respect and dignity. I don't ask you to close your eyes, but to keep your eyes constantly open to the serious issues that we can and should improve. I don't ask you to bow your heads, but to look up at what you can accomplish by applying your considerable talents and experience to the problems that confront us. As we meet today, let us think about ways we can work together on behalf of all who live on this planet. May we gain strength and sustenance from one another through reason and compassion. Amen. If you're a Rotarian and have a guest, please introduce him or her. And if we have no guests of Rotarians,
yes,
do we have one?
Yeah.
Oh,
Anna's
sorry.
Here.
Anna Belen Sains, a guest of Rick Bolzon's.
Oh, welcome, Anna.
So it's Rick this time.
That's Rick. Well, he's retired. He's on retired time. So. And do we have our prospective new member? Oh, Anna's a prospective. Oh my gosh. Okay, now I can name and a face. I get it. Okay, sorry. And I bet we have a speaker today.
Yes, we do. Pleasure to always introduce Mandy Bujold. I think everybody in the room knows who Mandy is.
Yeah.
And be more appropriately introduced when she's ready to speak.
Later, yeah. Welcome, Mandy and Anna. Rotarians, please join me in welcoming our guests. And Anna and Mandy, you have the privilege of leading the group to the buffet, but you need to be really quick.
You need to be quick. Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah, because we're going to follow you.
Good. Looks like it's building it today. Finding a new tenant. Come on, Anna. Oh, yes. Man's hanging around pretty good. What were you planning to do with these? What are those? Zip ties. How are you? Yeah, everything went well done.
Thanks for doing that.
I've got,
Oh, yeah.
I didn't feel bad.
Yeah, it's great. But I didn't see all of those police. Usually all of them really good.
Yeah, and you know what? I just feel like the moment we're trying to get him is that I just know my own
I'm okay.
Oh, good. Jamming it trying to get here. We're going away next week for...
Okay, so yeah, it's on to
The Habitat joined us, South Carolina.
I'm on his sponsorship on this
Sister-in-law's
thing.
place.
This is the best tournament.
Blue Ridge Mountains.
So here's our tournament. So every hole has a sponsor. It's like, oh, Ian met him there last year. He was like, oh, how was the Habitat tournament? I'm like, oh my god, I don't remember.
It just feels like it's been a long ready winter. It hasn't been really good outdoor activity weather. Just crappy.
Yeah. I'm on the committee now, so I'm there with them playing. So I got.
I didn't get one once.
They're just a fun tournament for the Habitat.
Golf.
Yeah.
Times that I was available.
Well, Mandy, I didn't introduce myself, so.
I have a.
Hi, John.
So glad. How was your?
I wasn't nervous.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, thanks for coming along.
Going golfing next week in South Carolina. Yeah. It'll be the first time I've golfed since, I think, September, so it's going to be a little rough. I haven't even been to the
Yeah, okay.
I keep promising myself.
So you had the one lady speak. She's 18. I was 18. I was working, yeah, I was working at the Gap, and I was like, I couldn't.
There's one of them.
That I am going to do indoor golf, but I guess start on the beach. So maybe when it comes, then I'm.
The granddaughter of Martin Luther King.
I've got a gift
So that was
card
from anybody. Like that was really cool.
for the Lincoln chocolate place up by the movie theater by Costco.
Yes.
It's a golf place there.
They're from you.
Yeah. And every time I try to get Mark at Lincoln, he's doing something else.
Yeah, so as soon as he was gone, I took it right at the end, just in case.
Oh, it's longer 24 hours out of the hours. It's me a buzz.
Definitely not me. I definitely.
And I don't do anything all day anyway.
But you got the books in the car yet?
We blew them Sunday.
I mean, that was part of the day for us wanted to go there. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, he really doesn't want to go.
Oh, and I'm supposed to go to New York and turn. I think she just has a place to
This weekend.
Yeah, she have it.
We just got bumped. Yeah. 7 o'clock. And we got bumped.
I don't feel
We did all last summer.
We'll talk about it.
It would be right on. We were on the little small.
I don't know, the one on the left-hand side.
On the left.
Yeah.
Said you're going in.
And sometimes you still like a lot of words by a girl who was about 18 should have been playing.
I went up to her and I was like,
I just remember blacking out and lying on Mom! And I thought, okay, it's not talking language, so drink the coffee and just called the woman from my special. It was just a little bit.
Well, apparently this year, that's
we'll have to plan something then when you're home.
we're there for a month.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to use all my energy on this.
Oh, okay. I think I saw something about bring it in the paper, yeah.
I wanted to talk to you. I'm happy you're here.
Oh,
You
very
read it
cool.
from Freedom 55.
Nope. No, I'm sorry, the other one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So in the drums
This is
You'll book 4 was awesome. And we'll give you my girlfriend a
So you are.
She's awesome. Like, super fun, friendly. And then Habitat. I'll send it one more email like you and it is, you won't want to miss out. What about, that's what, yeah,
That's what
once
he
a
does, let
year.
yourself up.
It is once a year. It's like a pharmacy.
Well, I sent it to Ed.
Oh, okay.
They check all the standards.
Is that stressful?
Everybody, that's a discipline. Pharmacy is a team of almost 15 people. Everybody have your responsible for things, patient, wise, and students in grades.
No, I'm good. Are you already registered for that? What's that? What's the registration?
Things went well, and said I'm done.
That's good, you've been running it.
Oh, I'm just there all the time. Like for me, like Jared was so fun.
I didn't want to lose too. It was amazing. And it is a decent
It's nice when people.
You know what tournament's not? It's the one that you played with Ryan. That one's not happening. There's another one on June 2nd.
He said you cannot
Red
be
River.
on it. You can sign up for it.
We need to sit down and talk about the tournament.
I'm excited because on Friday, my elder son is bringing the girl to dinner. He's gonna meet the rest of the family.
And then the only time we were going to play together, we got right now.
We only learned about her in February. I was allowed to meet her briefly last month, and not ask too many nosy questions. She's all mine, I
Well, now you'll have the opportunity to ask all those questions.
That's right. My younger son told me today, or the other day, he ends avoiding introducing his girlfriend to me, Mom. I'm even better yet. You've met her. Even Kyle was here, right? Yeah. And I think he's avoiding it. I said, I think you're right. You're the last person to introduce anybody that cares about this. My eldest is 29. He had a high school girlfriend. Second year, they both blew up. And, you know, after that, his heart would break. He would date, but he would never, like I used to say, seeing anybody's mom when it's important, I'll break it. It's important, I'll break it. Like I just, so he, but he would never go past the first date. Okay. He's got a bit of OCD, so he drives himself out of things because he thinks so much. A hand washing ritual, shower ritual. He lives alone, so he's trying to manage it. So I think because of that, he almost put things on. Yeah, I think it's hard to make sure
We're all.
it's true. That's what I love what you said. I should take that home. I'll take that home and bring it to the family. And then I can ask home.
Yeah. Ruin the relationship.
I'm so happy for him.
No, I don't like this.
What's the next one?
I don't like
Are they renovating?
No.
I don't like
Oh, that's really hard.
no, I just, he has a sense, but
He knows.
he's very professional. I'm nice to her, we get along, but
Probably the more professional you are, the less you don't respect
Yeah.
every time there's like,
Yeah. It's like
oh yeah, she's a family piece of
funny.
just a few more months. He's come down for the year.
It's hard though when you're not sure about your kids' friends, girlfriends. You have to be so careful you don't tip us one way or the other.
I don't think her name is Susan.
That's what I try to, I just play it shit. I just think that she's taking it.
Yeah. I love this girl.
Position in events or something. She was like a week or two.
Just sometimes.
So.
Yeah.
We went away the whole thing, and the youngest person, he's like taking pictures of his siblings. He just caught one. And it's a big deal. And I just don't understand the drama. They were playing cards.
You know, I don't pay.
Unclear. Sean gets it.
You have those girls.
That's right. Yeah, you don't know how it all relate. You're not going to survive.
Their boys are friends, or their friends, their boys are over and they do stupid things together.
Not like.
I have boys too.
I have boys.
And then, like my oldest, he said,
But
you women is what is happening or what behind what we say. Don't think you are thinking too hard.
It's not real deep. It's right on the surface.
Yeah. It's true. He has realized that. He has realized that.
I thought that's when I was going to get branded. I didn't.
Before you say something, what do you say? Don't think too hard.
What we say is what we mean.
And I get it.
We don't mean that. That's wrong. I didn't really mean that. Just a nice outfit.
Do you look at these faces and say, or not? Then Mark will come off and he'll say something. If you don't see the look on my face and say, or not.
No, there's only two that I like. St. Mary's, which I love.
Say what you mean or mean what you say. Is my backup plan when something comes up.
She has an umbrella.
Really puts the nail back deeper in my coffin, but at least I get to laugh at myself.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. I think I said what I meant to say.
Actually, Kathy Brothers was having a baby shower. I thought there was like a scam, like a junk email, which was it was like
bad
a lady named Veronica. Maybe it's her son-in-law. I have no idea who it is. And I thought they wanted to have a retirement home, but it's at my mom's home.
I'm just at home and we have
I was like, what is happening?
5 and 3 is very, very soft.
Well, I don't think it's hers. I think I eliminated that out of the equation.
Wow.
I also read it and I was like, what is going on?
Oh no, someone play this back.
That was brilliant.
Yeah, it wasn't close. Honey, I was just trying to have a little fun. It was so
Were you the only one left?
Yeah, it was not for long.
I have tried to record Marcus snoring so that he will know how to represent my entire life. And you know what? When you record that stuff, it doesn't sound nearly bad when
Oh,
you play
so
it
you
back.
have recorded.
Oh yeah, it's disappointing. I couldn't use it. It's like that's all that is.
Did you get real?
That's what kept me up.
I should have seen the weird ones. 4 and 1 and 3 and 2. I got into it. I no way. Because Paul's hospital, my older one, I ended up going in the kitchen and taking my lock, putting it on, shutting the door, and putting headphones on.
Was that loud?
Oh,
Yeah.
and even just one fellow, about every 5 minutes, he was just really loud. It was almost like it was a cross.
It's like sleep apnea.
Yeah.
Like when it does that, that's what scares me.
And then what's happening? I'm laying there thinking, so they shut this whole class in school. So I just picked my mattress and put it on the kitchen table. I had along with the table, and I slept on there. And it was fine because I couldn't deal with it.
Yeah, no kidding.
I was shocked.
Mr. President, I take
Wow.
I'm not gonna take
It doesn't really belong to us.
We're going to New York.
Some humor.
You?
It was just the two of us, and then
He didn't get it. He didn't get it.
You know,
It's gonna be one of those.
He said humor.
one is a plastic surgery before we go. Quick before we go. One's a lawyer.
Okay, everyone, you can keep eating, but I thought like, something came across my email that was humorous, and for those of you who've heard this, plug your ears. And Simon and Stephen are not here because it has to do with lawyers. Okay. So I'm just going to read a few. This is an important room, attorneys asking questions. Attorney, what is your birthday? Witness, July the 18th. What year? Every year. How old is your son, the one living with you? 38. Well, maybe 35. I can't remember which. Attorney, how long has he lived with you? 45 years. Doctors, Now, doctor, isn't it true that when a person dies in his sleep, he doesn't know about it until the next morning? Witness, did you actually pass the bar exam? Attorney, the youngest son, the 20-year-old, how old is he? Witness, he's 20, very close to your IQ. Attorney, were you present when the picture was taken? Witness, are you shitting me? So, the date of conception of the baby was August the 8th. Witness, yes. What were you doing at that time? Witness, getting laid. She had 3 children, right? Witness, yes. And how many were boys? None. Were there any girls? Your Honor, can I have a different attorney? Attorney, how was your first marriage terminated? Witness, by death. And by whose death was it terminated? Take a guess. There's another one here. Okay, doctor. Attorney, doctor, how many autopsies have you been performed on dead people? All of them. The live ones put up too much of a fight. Attorney, all of your responses must be oral, okay? What school did you go to? Oral. Do you recall the time that you examined the body? Yes, the autopsy started at 8:30. And Mr. Denton, was he dead at the time? Well, if he wasn't, he was dead by the time I finished. Now, before you performed the autopsy, did you check for a pulse? No. Did you check for blood pressure? No. Did you check for breathing? No. So then it's possible the patient was alive when you began the autopsy? No. How can you be so sure, doctor? Because his brain was sitting in a jar beside him. I see, but could the patient have still been alive nevertheless? Yes, it's possible he could have been alive and practicing law.
Well done.
You just gave me a couple more years couldn't have you been carrying that around with you for
No, I
Right away.
yeah. I was going to apologize to
Just me and my Joe Fisher make my favorite joke related.
Oh, sure they do. I got it 2 days ago.
Grown.
He is so nice, man. He always tells groaners, you're right.
Grown.
Sure, these are actual.
How is he doing? It seems for a little while.
He's about every at least once a month or something. And he seems quite well.
They must be on a different one spot.
The last one.
No, Doug. No, Doug. His health was a little frail. I thought oh, yeah. Jerome's here.
Well, I have to go over there and find
Oh, you could go
You put
One last week,
well, I don't know, like that. We're all thin. When I out here, and then it just because it years ago, when I had chemo there.
You know better?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
He talks for 4 minutes when he's phone. At the end of the conversation.
So we'll continue on with the
Take
club
advantage of the
business.
good
Not a whole lot this week. We do have a birthday. Bob Keyswetter is not here today, is he? March 31st for Bob Keyswetter. I'm not sure which one it is, but they're all big. No wedding anniversaries, no club anniversaries. We had a whole raft last week. We had about 4 or 5 members with club anniversaries. Karen, did you know last week was your club anniversary? That was 17 years, does that sound right? It was right on the day, March 22nd. Just a little bit of club business this week. This made my week, actually. On May the 6th, at the City Hall Rotunda, we're going to be making a check presentation to Allison's Dragon Boat team. And the best part about this is the presenters are Graham and Louise Gardner.
Yeah.
It's May 6th. Is that a noon hour tea or?
It goes from 2 to 4. It's a fundraiser for, it's a breast cancer team, and we are doing our first international regatta in Italy, but we're also, last year was the first year we could fill the boat, so we're pretty excited to be a full team now.
Wow.
And thank you so much for the Rotary donation.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So 2 to 4 at the Rotunda. It's a high tea. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm just thrilled that Graham's coming.
Hey, I'm. If you can go, May 6th is the date, and it'll be great. So if it's in Italy, will it be a gondola or?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a full dragon boat. It's still, yeah, that's Venice.
Where in Italy did you actually do the race?
So we're actually going. It's an international breast cancer regatta that goes down the Orno right through the middle of Florence.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So we'll be just. I've never been to Italy, but apparently that's stunning.
It is. It's great.
Yeah.
Bridges that go.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, big day for us and Graham and Louise, of course. Earlier this week, thanks to Brandon Flewelling and John Thompson, we visited Kids Ability and handed them a $30,000 check for their Spark program. So thanks to John and Brandon for doing that earlier this week. I went along too, so there'd be some good looks in the photo. And anyway, thanks guys for arranging that. The goal this year is whenever there's a check presentation to attend the organization and get a picture so that when we're selling VFL tickets, people know what we're doing with the money. We try to publicize the organization that we help. So thanks to Brandon and John for doing that earlier this week. VFL, keep selling those tickets, keep the pedal to the metal. Turn in your results as soon as possible so we can gauge how we're doing. International conventions. So last week I announced that I had bought 10 tickets to Rock, the historic distillery district, on the 26th, June 26th. Those tickets are gone. Members have bought them up, but it's very easy to go to the website and just, if you go to the host organizing committee events, just click on that and it's right there. So when I got the tickets, they had lots left. So that's an evening at the distillery district, and there's all kinds of food and fun and so on. So get your tickets on the site. That's it's the easiest way to get them. So if you want to join us, by all means. And I think that's all I've got to say. Do any members have anything that they want to share, or any club business that we should share? That's a no. I don't know why I added this week. I was looking online and was reading the news. This day in history. I don't know why I put it on. So in 1979, on this day, something really disastrous happened in the U.S. Anybody have any idea what that was? 70? No, nothing to do with Trump. 79.
Challenger?
3 Mile Island on this day in 79. 1939, the Spanish Civil War ended. I didn't know that. Must have ended just before the Second World War started. And in 1915, on this day, the first American was killed in World War I. One of many after that. So anyway, happened on this date. Get your tickets out for the jackpot. Thanks to Jerome Freiberger, we have a whopping $39 today. Jerome, was the money gone already?
I haven't got it yet.
You haven't got it yet? No. Well, I heard you had donated it back to the club. Is that not correct?
No.
It's your fee for being president. That's your pay for next year. Okay, so the first lucky contestant will have ticket 173. Last 3 digits are 173. John.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I didn't want to really get up.
$39. So the money lives on 151. Ticket number 151. Check my own here. Yeah, I'm the winner. Oh, I am.
That's funny.
Whoa. Validation.
Mandy fixed.
Yeah, 39. Oh, so close. And ticket number 146.
Ooh, right behind me.
There we go.
Greg.
Can I pass?
Let's
I want to win.
You just want to win. You just want to come up. That's not very close at all. And we just realized we still have a copy of a book called Corporate Karma. Thanks to Dave Barth, he brought these in. We still have a couple copies left. So if you have ticket number 150, you get a copy of this book. That might be me also. It is. I win the book. Yay. Did everybody get one of these? And polio now? We were trying to distribute them around the room. Wear it. It's a good thing. And people ask you what it's all about, and you can tell them all about how we're getting rid of polio. And Rotary trivia. You guys better get this. I felt sorry for you, so I made it easier this week. Who was the club president of this club in 1985-86?
Chuck Johnson.
Nope. Nope. Wrong.
Don Wilcox.
You guys aren't doing it very well.
Don Wilcox.
No.
Still a member.
85? No, he is not. Still a member.
Oh.
That's a long time ago.
Neil, you should know this.
Yes.
But your memory's failing, right?
Was it Neil?
No, not Neil.
Bob Forwell?
Gary Hour?
I heard it. Yes, well done. Well done.
Who was it?
Bob Forwell.
Oh.
He said that 10 minutes ago, but it didn't say that.
Who said? You got to scream it out.
Yeah.
For what? Yeah.
You want?
You know, his son still
Neil
lives
needs a
in-
mic.
You guys should split it up.
And he flies up.
Yeah,
for
here.
a Christmas party or President's Night. Dave Forwell, still a member of the club. Yeah.
Yeah, Allison just mentioned, so Dave Forwell is still a member of our club. He's moved to Texas a number of years ago, but he still comes back for the Christmas party. He's coming to the International Convention in June, so we get to see him periodically, and I get an email from him every once in a while. So yeah, Dave is, of course, Bob passed away quite a few years ago now, but was a great member of our club, and I'm sure was a great president. So that's it for me. So Allison, please introduce our speaker.
Yeah, stand up. I know, sorry. I feel like Mandy needs no introduction because she's so well known, but I think her accomplishments are worthy of repeating. So, Mandy Bujold is an amateur boxer whose career was launched following a successful 2006 when she claimed the Canadian National Championship and Boxer of the Year titles.
Since that time, she's won 11 consecutive Canadian National Championships, 3 Continental Championships, a bronze medal at the Commonwealth Games, and 2 back-to-back golds at the 2011 and 2015 Paralympic Games. Mandy finished 5th at the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. Away from boxing, Mandy was a part of the 2015 Pan Am Games Organization Committee and worked on a bid with Waterloo Region for the 2021 Canada Games. She is also the current athletes representative for Boxing Canada and a true sports ambassador. Quite an accomplishment. Please welcome Mandy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a little short because I always need to like carry a little box that I can stand on.
Stand on it.
It's like this. So I'm really excited to be here today. So I was here many years ago, for those that do remember. I feel like that was around the time, maybe around 2011, when women's boxing was just introduced as an Olympic sport. So a lot has happened since that time. One of the major things being becoming an Olympian and reaching that goal of becoming part of the percent of the world, 0.0001% that actually gets to call himself an Olympian, which I'm really proud of. So I will tell you a little bit more about that story. But I also want to leave some time for you guys to ask me questions at the end. So I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about how I got involved in the sport, because that is the question that I get asked most often. For those that haven't heard it, you will kind of get a bit of a background. So my journey to the top of the boxing world is not your typical Olympic story. So I'm not one of those athletes that started training at the age of 3 and was an all-around athlete growing up and then decided I was going to specialize in the sport of boxing. Actually, quite the opposite. So as a young girl, I was actually never really involved in sport. And I think the reason for that was because when I did kind of do something for a few weeks here and there, my parents would pick the sports they'd put me in, and they'd always decide on things like baton twirling or artistic gymnastics where I'd run around with a ribbon. And not that those aren't great sports, those are good for some people, but I wasn't flexible and I wasn't good at those sports. So I just assumed that I wasn't an athlete. I knew there was people out there that they're athletic, I'm just not one of them. And that kind of carried along, and I think when you have a bad experience in sport, it's hard to kind of get out of that and actually convince yourself to try something else. So even to the point where when I was in high school and gym class was no longer mandatory, I don't know if it is now, but I decided to opt out of gym class. So I didn't even take gym class. And so it wasn't until I was 16 years old that I walked into a boxing club and changed my life forever. And the reason I walked into a boxing club was because my brother started boxing. So he joined the Waterloo Regional Boxing Academy, which is a really famous boxing club here in town, and he was getting in shape and he was learning something new. And I think when I looked at boxing, I didn't really think of it as like your typical sport. I looked at it more like a skill that you'd be able to learn. And there was just some interest in that for me. It just looked like something that would be a lot of fun and something that would be very demanding and just a bit of a challenge for me. So when I started boxing, it was just for fun. You know, I was going 3 times a week, and that was it. I never once imagined that I would ever compete at the Olympic Games, let alone ever compete at all. And to be quite honest, I don't even think I knew what the Olympic Games were when I walked into a boxing club. So eventually, after about a year of training, I let some of the coaches at the gym convince me that I should compete, that I was good enough to actually get into the ring. And so I did. I signed up for my first tournament. It was in Brampton. And I remember it like it was yesterday, you know, preparing for that fight. I was going up against a more experienced opponent. She had 3 fights to my 0. It was a really intimidating experience, and I realized when I was like preparing for this that I knew how to throw punches, but I didn't actually know the rules of boxing. Like I had no idea how to win a fight, you know, what the official was going to be telling me, any of that. So I literally was just kind of thrown in, you're ready to go, here you go. But it ended up being a great experience for me. And the other thing I do remember from that day was, you know, I was warming up, I had my gloves on, And I remember looking over to the ring and thinking, I'm going to be able to go in there and beat someone up, and this is legal? Like, I honestly had felt like I'd been waiting my entire life for a moment like this. So that was truly when I realized that this was something that I was going to enjoy and something that I was passionate about. And from that moment was when boxing became something that I did every day, to basically a part-time job, to a full-time career. And since that time, as you heard in my introduction, I've had a lot of accomplishments along the way. And one of the ones that I'm really, really proud of is 11-time Canadian national champion. So I'm the longest reigning Canadian champion in history, male or female. So that's something that I'm really proud of, and I'm actually this week giving up that title because they just did the draw yesterday. It's happening in Edmonton, so it's a little nerve-wracking for me to see kind of what's happening there, but nonetheless, I still have the title. It will take someone a long time to beat that. So yeah, winning gold at the Pan American Games in 2011 and then again in 2015 was also a really big highlight for me in my career. And then obviously the Olympics was a goal that I've had for a very long time. So I've had an amazing opportunity representing Canada around the world. I've been to over 35 countries now with the sport of boxing, something that I never imagined I would have actually had the opportunity to do. But my life has been very different from most people at my age. So rather than working, a 9-to-5 job, I was always training 2 to 3 times a day, 6 days a week. So I didn't really have a life outside of my boxing world. And I think I often, meet people and people ask me all the time, like, how do you stay so motivated, so determined day after day after day when you're doing the same thing over and over and over again? And I can honestly say that it comes down to 2 things for me. Over my career, it's been setting goals for myself and always focusing on the process and not the outcome. So one of the things I do when I'm setting goals for myself, and it's super simple, but I write them down. And I know there's a stat that says 80% of goals that are written down are achieved. So it's not just writing that goal down and then throwing it in your desk and forgetting about it, right? It's about, making that your screensaver, making it something that you're constantly focusing on so that you know what you're working toward. And that's something I've always done. As I was preparing for tournaments, I always had a sign on my wall that said, if I was preparing for the Canadian Championships, it would read, I am the 2018 51 kilo Canadian national champion. So as if it's already happened. So I can imagine what it's going to be like when I'm in that position. And I know when I'm having those hard days, when I don't want to wake up in the morning, when I don't want to go to bed early, or I'm missing out on something, I know what it is that I'm focused on. And that's something that's always helped me along my career. And another thing, focusing on the process. So what are those, so now that I have my goal, what are those small process goals? Like if I do X, Y, and Z, that's going to lead me to that ultimate outcome. So those are the things that I always focused on. It's the same if you're doing something, let's say in sales. You know how many calls you have to make, how many meetings you have to have in order to achieve that goal that you're trying to accomplish. So it's the same thing for me in the sports side of things. And I think, when you're setting goals, if you don't have a plan, then really it's only a dream. So trying to turn that dream into reality by creating a plan on how you're going to get there is really how I've been able to accomplish a lot of the things that I have accomplished. So as we know, every career has a lot of ups and downs, obstacles along the way. And in 2016, I overcame a very big obstacle at the Olympic Games. So I'll give you a little bit of background. So imagine my journey. So 13 years of training for this moment. I've qualified for the Olympic Games, something that I've dreamt about for my entire life. I've already started my mission towards that gold medal that I've dreamt about by beating my first opponent from Uzbekistan in my first fight. So the day of my quarterfinal match, which would have been a guaranteed bronze medal match for me, I find myself laying in a hospital bed. I look down, I see an IV in my arm. My body is heavy and weak, and I can barely find the energy to keep my eyes open. I can't believe this is happening to me, especially at this moment. And all that's going through my head is, what do I do? I felt like I had imagined every possible scenario leading up to that moment, because that's what athletes do. You think about, I'm preparing for the Olympics, I'm going to think about, what if I sprain my ankle? What if I dislocate my shoulder? How am I going to react, and what am I going to do in order to be able to compete. So I thought I had thought about every single thing, but this was something that I had never imagined because it was something I never dealt with in or outside of the ring, and it was so out of my control. So I had come down with a tourist virus that the doctors were actually trying to give me medications, and they had an IV in me to try to replace 5 pounds of fluids that I had lost overnight. So I was surrounded by 3 doctors and a bunch of nurses and everyone trying to figure out, this was literally just hours before I was about to step into the ring. So it was chaos. And I think while I was in the midst of all this chaos, there was this constant thought that kept going through my head. And that was something that my sports psychologist used to tell me, and he used to drill this into me, and now I know why. And it was, it's not about what happens to you that counts, it's about how you react to what happens to you that matters. And for some reason, it just kept playing over and over in my head. So I thought, you know what, this is a really shitty moment, and I could be really mad, and I could get frustrated and use up that last bit of energy that I had, or, you know what, I can try to stay positive and try to keep that energy for when it's going to count, when I'm going to step into the ring. Because it never actually ever crossed my mind that I wasn't going to step into the ring that day. About an hour and 10 minutes before I was meant to fight that day, I pulled that IV out. I actually, we had these like communal bikes that we could use. I jumped on a bike, and there was a volunteer that literally was tasked with running beside me to make sure I didn't fall off my bike. And I went over to the venue. And the next thing I knew, I was there. I remember putting my boxing gear on, unable to warm up because of the energy loss that morning. So I decided to focus on being mentally prepared. Up to that point, I have had over 145 fights. So I had been in that situation 145 times. I knew what I was supposed to be thinking. I knew what I was supposed to be feeling. So I focused on trying to bring up those emotions and really just try to fake what was supposed to be happening, because that's really all I could do at that moment. The next thing, there was a camera in my face. I was standing behind a curtain, and my name was being announced to the entire world. That Olympic dream that I had dreamt about for so long. And so I put my game face on, and I went out and competed. And most people would have given up that morning in the hospital bed. But I knew that this was something that I would have regretted my entire life if I hadn't gone out there and at least given it all I had left. And oftentimes I think as athletes, we put so much pressure on ourselves to win, win, win all the time. And sometimes there are going to be things like this that happen that are so out of our control. And I think the most important thing to do is to think about what are those things that you do have control over, to control the controllable. And the only thing that I had control over in this situation was my attitude. You know, how was I going to, you know, go into this situation? And that day I stepped into the ring against an Olympic silver medalist and now bronze medalist, and a 3-time world champion from China. Moments after laying in a hospital bed, when the doctors didn't think I was actually going to be able to walk, I realized how strong I really am, and I realized what all the training over the years had really done for me, and that I was stronger, mentally stronger, and more stubborn than I ever imagined. So I also realized at that point that it really was about the process for me, and about that journey kind of leading up to that moment. So that is my Olympic story, and always, you know, something that is difficult for me to share because it's not the way that I wanted to inspire or the way I wanted that story to end. So I am kind of hoping to rewrite that history in 2020 and have that other opportunity to go compete at the Olympics. But right now, I have recently announced that I am taking a bit of a step back from competing at the international level. So it's been 13 years that I've been competing internationally, and honestly just never really had the time to focus on anything else other than being the best that I can be in boxing. So right now I'm working just down the street at Communitech in business development, and so it's a whole new journey for me. It's been quite the transition. It's actually been a lot smoother than I thought it was going to be, but I'm enjoying it, and I've also started working on some of my other projects because I don't feel like I live in a boxing bubble anymore. I can actually get involved and do some of the other things in the community that I want to do. So I started running some high performance mentorship camps for youth. I started a YouTube channel sharing some knowledge as as well. So yeah, so that's some of the things that I am doing now. And then I guess the rest is just, if anyone has any questions that they'd like me to answer. Yes, Leah.
So you two questions.
Yeah.
First, that first bout you had in Brent, did you win?
Yes. I stopped her in the second round, and it was actually funny because the referee stopped the fight, and I remember going over to the corner, and they started taking my gloves, my headgear off, and I actually didn't even know if I won. Like, I knew I was doing good, but I was like, did I lose?
So was it TKO'd it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back then, yeah.
And so you alluded to, just want to confirm, you are going to be there in 2020?
Yeah, so the plan is, right now, anything can happen, anything can change, but my plan is to reevaluate kind of at the end of this year and just see where I'm at, and if that's something that I still have that desire to put that energy in, because it's, you know, you basically have to stop doing everything else in your life to be able to get to that level. And so I have really good relationships with Boxing Canada, and they're going to keep me involved in a capacity this year as I kind of figure out other things. But yes, the goal is Yep.
I just want to point out, and Jerome just reminded me that on 2 occasions you've been the Athlete of the Year here in our community, and we're very proud of you for that. And hopefully you're going to be out this year when we celebrate the 20th anniversary. And the other thing I want to point out is, as great as she has all these boxing achievements, I remember, it doesn't seem that long ago, but I think it was about 10 or maybe 12 years ago when we were putting a campaign together to build the Activa Center. And we were looking for an honorary chair, a champion. So you were about 16, 17, 18 years of age then. And you came forward, and you were a great community citizen for championing that. And of course, that's where the Waterloo Region Boxing Academy is located now.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other thing. Neil, could you stand up for a second, please?
You're a fighter.
Neil knows better.
So what are the similarities here between our Olympian and Neil? Other than the obvious, you know,
We should have a
both
bottle of wine to give for this.
finely tuned machines, et cetera, et cetera. But they're both Lions Club Citizens of the Year in the past couple of years, so kudos to both of you for.
And we rode together in a limousine when I was giving it up to the brand new.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, well, you have me up now, how's your husband and family and everybody? How have they fit? I know Kitchener Sports Association supported you, lots of people locally that coach you. And then how did it impact your family and your husband now?
Well, I was really lucky to find a very supportive now husband. We got married in August. Basically right after 2012 is when we met, and we stayed together ever since. We knew we wanted to get married right away, but we decided to wait for after the Olympics to make that happen. So yeah, I'm honestly very blessed with the family that I have and the support that I have. And you know, when I went over to Rio, my entire family came over there, and some friends as well. So it's always been great to have that kind of support, and even like within the community, you know, there's a lot of very familiar faces here as well. Just that constant support that I've gotten from this community is absolutely incredible. And I know a lot of the athletes that are on my team and other Olympic teams kind of look at what the city of Kitchener has done for me over the years and are very jealous. I will tell you that. They're very jealous. They're always asking me, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you get these people involved? And it's a Kitchener thing. I don't know. It's amazing though. Yeah.
When you're training for something like the Olympics, you're looking to, you obviously have to have a sparring partner.
Yeah.
Are
you volunteering?
John here's about But I would just imagine a world-class athlete that's at 51 kilos must be hard to find.
It is.
Here in this area, like how do you find sparring partners?
So again, I've been lucky to have community partners to help me with that, and just to be able to bring in sparring partners from different parts of the world. So oftentimes I've brought in girls from Italy, girls from Ireland, girls from the US to be my sparring partners. Otherwise, I beat up the boys. But yeah, that's definitely a challenge, and it's something that you have to think about, because that person has to be as motivated as you, right? So even if you're in a local gym and there's someone, so you can kind of play around with like how much weight or experience they have. So you might be fighting someone who's a bit heavier but less experienced. So sometimes it can kind of play out. But again, you need that person every day when you're in the gym. You need someone as motivated as you are to keep you kind of at that intensity. So that's always the biggest challenge.
And the women's boxing team here in Canada, is it a tight-knit group, or you guys kind of just spread out all over Canada and you meet up every 4 years?
Well, it's actually spread out. Well, it used to be spread out. So last year, Boxing Canada decided, which is actually part of the reason why I'm taking some time off, that they wanted to centralize the boxing system. So everyone now, as a part of the national team, has to move to Montreal. So they're trying to get everyone training together and working together, but the problem is that they've sort of set it up, but not really. So they don't have a proper gym, they don't have proper coaches. So there's a lot of reasons why I don't want to be there, which means that I gave up all of my funding. So everything that I had over the years kind of helping me get to this point is all gone because I won't make that move to Montreal. So it was a really, really tough decision for me, but something that I think is in my best benefit, because I would rather work with coaches that I know have my best interest at heart than move to Montreal just because that's what it says I have to do on paper.
Like, why Montreal?
Well, they have the Olympic Training Center there, so they have some centralized sports there, but that's just where the coach that wants to be running this, that shouldn't be running this. He's self-appointed himself, let's just put it that way.
Perhaps you could encourage them to reconsider bringing Kitchener. We got a lot of talent here.
Yeah, we've tried talking them into bringing it to Toronto before my coach passed away, and it wasn't up for discussion. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Are there any young stars on the horizon?
So there's actually a girl from Sid Fit, just down the street here, that's actually at the Nationals right now. She's a youth boxer, Danielle. Other than that, I'm doing most of my training in Guelph, so there's a few girls that are actually there in Guelph that are training as well. On the men's side of things, this region doesn't have as much for guys right now that are kind of up and coming that you will see either at the national or provincial level. So boxing is very much up and down. Like there's some times where there'll just be a whole bunch, and especially even women's boxing, you notice there's a whole bunch of competition, and then all of a sudden one year you go to a tournament and there's nobody. Like it's really weird. It's not consistent. There's a lot of up and down, and I think it's sad in Canada that happens because internationally it's just continuing to grow and grow. And when they announce like women's boxing in the Olympics, they now have world championships and continental championships for girls as young as 14. So now our girls, they're waiting till they're senior. When they're over 18, they're going to compete, but they're competing against girls who are now winning a world title at the age of 14. Yeah. So it's hard to be able to kind of compete at that level anymore.
And is that because we don't do a good job of promoting boxing with the younger people?
I would say so. Yeah. I would say so. And I think it's just not as much a part of our culture, right? Yeah. Like in the US, it's a lot bigger. In Ireland, and there's a lot of countries that's like one of their major sports. Here, it's hockey, right? Or it's one of those sports. So it's hard. There's a lot of, like, I've always tried to I go into schools, I do a lot of promotion in that way, but it's also hard to take people from that doing it recreationally to doing it competitively. Yeah. So.
And one other thought that hit me, when you box from someone from another country, are there significant differences in style?
Yes. Yes. So well, I would say more like within the continent. So if you're fighting someone within the Americas, it's more of like a brawler style. They want to kind of stay in the center of the ring and they want to fight. Yeah. Whereas when you go over to Europe, it's very much more technical. They kind of have a different stance. They keep their hand out a little bit further, so you have to kind of work on how you're going to get in to attack a little bit more. In Asia, they're not about power at all. They don't hit heavy bags. They don't do any of that. It's very much like just like a touch. Yeah, so it's all speed. Yeah. So sometimes when you're fighting them, it's a little confusing because you think like, well, that shouldn't be a point, but sometimes it is, and you're yeah. So there's definitely styles across, but you kind of get an idea based on where they're from of like what that style is going to look like. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah?
I'm always interested in gender questions.
Okay.
So is there any differences at all in rules and regulations around, and so that's the first part, rules and regulations. Now also, strategy, so when you're sparring with guys versus sparring with girls.
Mm-hmm. So the first question, as far as rules and regulations, so now at the Olympics level, women keep a headgear on, men do not. So that was recent, which is a really silly study because they're actually saying that it's safer to box without a headgear because you're not just standing there taking punches, assuming that you're being protected by this headgear, but then yet they won't take it off of the women. So it's like, are they not trying to protect us or are they trying to protect us? So it's really weird, but they're still trying to figure out all the background of that. And then as far as like strategy, so if I was to spar with a girl versus a guy, there's a very big difference. Obviously strength being the biggest thing, but it would definitely be a lot more intense to spar with a guy than it would be with a girl, depending on who they are. But the guys can always keep like a different pace that a girl doesn't usually keep. Yeah.
So Mandy, just to follow on Dave's question.
Yeah.
What is the so-called concussion protocol now with boxing?
Well, it's very similar to what it's always been. So if there's a knockout that happens, there's always a suspension right after that, keeping you away from sport for a certain amount of time, depending on how severe it is. But you're always examined by a doctor. The same with like as you're preparing for a fight. Every day that you're about to fight, you have a medical, so you're always being checked out on that side of things. But I think there's always a big conception or misconception that there's a lot of concussions in boxing, and there actually isn't. And if you look at a list of like concussions that happens in sport, boxing is probably near the bottom. And I think the reason being is that when you're boxing someone, you're never getting hit from behind or from the side when you're not expecting it, which happens in football and in hockey and in soccer. And, you know, you're in the ring, you've got a person in front of you, the left and right hand, you know that's what's coming at you, and the very first thing you're going to learn is defense. And when a punch is coming at you, the amount of times that you actually take a punch with that full impact, I could probably count on both hands. Because simple fact of, you know, if you throw a punch at me, I could touch it with one finger and I'm deflecting the power out of that punch. So you're obviously being like sort of touched with them, or they're hitting your headgear or whatever, but the full impact of those punches don't happen as often as you would think, and it's not, I guess, the way movies portray it as like a Rocky movie, and you see that, like if that ever happened in real life, it would be very dangerous. So yeah.
Thanks very much, Mandy. A couple more questions?
What's the toughest, headshot, body shot?
I would say body shot by far. It's hard to recover from a body shot, especially if you're like breathing out at the same time. That you get hit with a body shot, it just kind of like, it makes you crumble.
So Everton's going to thank you, and if you wanted to demonstrate a few
yeah.
techniques on
Pardon me, look at all these other people. Neil,
I'm glad I know
that. Mandy, thank you for coming in and sharing your story with us. It's really neat. We hear your name all the time, but you don't know the backstory, and I found it interesting that sports wasn't your thing to begin with, you know, and it was just something else that caught your attention and drove you through, and just the way you stick with it and the goals, and you know, to work three times a day training, man.
Like 3 times a year.
I go to the gym twice a week, and that's hard. So it's good, and you know. Our region is special, and I'm glad you're from this region, because we do support athletes all around. We see that with so many who've come, and I'm glad you've chosen to stay here. I know you have a tough decision ahead of you, but I'm glad in this point you have. And to thank you for coming out today. We've restored the eyesight of a male named Kiplagat in Kenya on your behalf.
You should be landing a punch. Come on.
Thanks so much. So, great talk today. Thanks so much, Mandy. It was really cool to hear about your experience. And good luck in the next couple of years. If there's nothing else for the good of Rotary, this meeting is adjourned.
Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.